It's the Jetsons. The reason I start with this is in our last episode, our previous episode, I talked about my view that things are going to get better and better, that life is moving in the direction of improvement, and that I think the future is right here depicted in this early 60s cartoon, The Jetsons. All right, let's just stop. The Jetsons. There it is. These writers and creative people in Hollywood have predicted the future for all of us, that we'll go about in flying cars and have robots doing everything for us, and instant food, and essentially high-speed travel anywhere on the globe. Well, actually, I did do a little research on the Jetsons, and there are a number of things, if you've ever watched it, that have come to pass. The interactive television, and I mean, I remember even 10 or 15 years ago thinking we will never be able to talk face to face from across the globe, right? I was skeptical back then, and now you can do it from your phone, from on the other side of the globe. So the Jetsons have a lot of technologies that have come to pass. I don't think flying cars is something in our future, and like Star Trek, transporter beams. I don't think beaming, demolecularizing people and reassembling them in a remote location. I don't think that's in our future, but there are limitations on the physical world. But hello, welcome to the Saturday show. It's Save the World Saturday, and I'm going to make this a quick one since tomorrow is Easter Sunday. But let me quickly review what I talked about previously. Just do a quick review of what the heck this show is about. If you're new to the channel Sovereign Art Sock, I am Michael Gavlak, a Hollywood guy working on a project. It's a long process, and so I have other irons in the fire as well, but I have an Armenian genocide project that has kind of led me to start this channel. And on Saturdays, I am projecting forward into the future. I started last week by talking about the 4 worldviews that everybody watching this will fall into one of these categories. Every person watching this will be one of these categories. The 2 major categories are Christian or non-Christian, and then specifically, not every person that calls himself is a Christian. Not every person that calls himself a Christian is a Christian. So it boils down to the resurrection, whether you believe that Jesus rose physically from the dead and never died again, right? And that all followers of Jesus will have that same experience. Some will not die, but everyone who does die, believes in him, will resurrect. Okay, that is the dividing line between the green section and the orange section here. If you don't believe that, then you're in the orange section. All right, but then each of these major categories have 2 subcategories. There are Christian optimists, Christian pessimists, non-Christian pessimist, non-Christian optimist, which essentially just means the optimists believe that life on earth gets better, and the pessimists believe that life on earth gets worse. For the remainder of this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about one thing that I said, actually 2 things that I said in the previous episode. One is that this distinction of the major categories, resurrection and no resurrection, it is, some of you watching this are non-Christian, and you're like, nobody's raised from the dead. That's nonsense. That doesn't happen. That's mythology. That's fantasy. I'm going to close at the end of this by sharing something from the most preeminent evolutionary biologist, a little video that's queued up, that demonstrates he's the most preeminent evolutionary biologist, highly reputable, very wealthy. He's written some books about his views, but he admits something. Those of you who think it's ridiculous to believe in the resurrection will you'll hear what preeminent evolutionary biologist believes. But before that, I did talk about previously that the Earth I love this app. Let's just look at Armenia. That things are going to get better, and that even if the polar ice caps melt, that is not the end of the world. In fact, this is controversial, but that it might be a good thing, right? If the global temperatures rise to the point where there's no polar ice caps, there's more water, slightly less land surface, but more farmable land. Statistically, there are more people every year who die as a result of extreme cold versus extreme heat. Right, so this fear that higher temperatures leads to more people dying. Even today, in the warmer climates, very, very few people die from heat exposure. But in the colder climates, exponentially more people die from freezing to death. Okay, that's just one example of why it could be better. But I want to make one other point, that if human ingenuity and the industrial nature of humans that lead to inventions, as we're looking at the Jetsons, all of these inventions require ingenuity, which means factories, which means digging in the ground and cranking out some form of pollution. If that is an evil that should be fought against, which I don't think technology and innovation is an evil, I think there are abuses to industry. There are abuses to the environment. There are big corporations that will push the limits if they're allowed to pollute and crank nasty stuff into, whether it's the atmosphere or into the ocean, that they should be held in check. And statistically, I don't have the statistics here, but the United States, through regulation, and in some cases maybe over-regulation, but through regulation has gotten our pollutants, our polluters, under control. Like, you used to not be able to even see the sky in Los Angeles a couple decades ago. Now it's pristine and clear. However, those who focus on over-regulating, I would say, industry in the United States, if they really think that the pollution is an evil that needs to be stopped, the abusers, then they need to focus their attention on this side of the planet. China and India are the greatest abusers, and they don't have the regulations that we have. And so, and I'm in agreement, there should not be abuse of the environment. And so I think all of the environmentalists who are up in arms about the United States are a bunch of hypocrites if they don't focus their energies on the greatest polluters. Okay, that's just a comment I wanted to make. Before I close, I want to make another statement about what this Saturday special Save the World. One of the things we're going to focus on is, I believe a paradigm shift is on the horizon. I believe it's something. If I have anything to do with it, I will implement it. I will do my best to implement it, whatever I can. It's something I've mentioned before, but I need to bring it up here because I haven't really mentioned it since I started the Saturday special, or the Saturday show, Save the World. A paradigm shift in the human condition is on the horizon. And what I believe it is, and I believe it will ultimately lead to the solution of just about every problem we face. And that is the ultimate corporate ownership of the most valuable commodity. All right, I've stated that before, and I haven't yet phrased it. I haven't yet put it into a succinct term, but I will explain it. that a paradigm shift of mutual ownership will transform human relations so that people will stop killing each other, period. All right, let me just finish with this. So this guy, this is Ben Stein, who's doing the interview of Richard Dawkins, preeminent evolutionary biologist, talking about where did life come from. So if you are of the Christian persuasion, believing in the resurrection, and if you are not of that persuasion and you think it's crazy to think somebody rose from the dead, one of the greatest evidences for the resurrection of the dead, again, this is not to be preachy. Like I am just explaining what the different worldviews are. I find myself in the Christian optimist category, which is a minority view, but I want to just explain to those who may find themselves as non-Christians just what we believe. One of the greatest evidences for the resurrection of Jesus, which we celebrate tomorrow on Easter, that he rose physically, bodily from the dead, and then commissioned his disciples and followers to follow in his footsteps, that they obeyed. Right? If he hadn't actually convincingly risen from the dead and appeared to them, there would not have been an explosion of the Christian church. There's just no rational explanation for why people would lay down their lives for something they knew was false. If it was just made up, that they just spread a rumor or a story that guy Jesus actually rose from the dead. If he didn't actually rise from the dead, who's going to lay down their lives for a lie? And so it's spread. It's become the greatest world religion. So that in itself is evidence for, at least partial evidence for the veracity of those claims. Now, the non-Christian will say, one of the prevalent views of the non-Christians is there's no God. There's no God at all. And so this guy, Richard Dawkins, is an atheist. Not the Jetsons. Not this guy, Ben Stein. You'll see Richard Dawkins here in a second. Preeminent evolutionary biologist. And Ben Stein is asking him point blank, where did life come from?
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right. How did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No. Nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else.
All right, I'm going to let this play a little bit more, but he's said here 3 times within less than a minute, nobody knows. And we don't know, I don't know where life came from. This is the foremost evolutionary biologist. Nobody has any idea where life came from. Earlier in the interview, he proposed the notion of panspermia, which means there was alien life forms that either brought life here or engineered life and sent it here. But that doesn't answer the question of where that life could have come from. This is the foremost evolutionary biologist saying we have no idea. Maybe it came from outer space. All right, so Jesus rose from the dead or aliens created life and sent it to Earth. Pick your idea. I'll let this play out a little more and then we'll conclude here.
What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe.
Well,
but that
All right, and that is the point I was making earlier. I thought it was earlier in the clip, but a higher intelligence could have designed life. What's the difference between that and God creating, designing life. Nothing, right? God is by definition a higher intelligence. All right, that's it. I'm not, again, for those of you who find yourself in the non-Christian category, I'm not trying to be preachy. I'm just trying to present the different points of view. All right, this went longer than I expected, but happy Easter, everyone. I will be celebrating the resurrection tomorrow. Hope you will as well with you and your family, and I'll see you next week.